I start, I'd first like to thank Selena and the whole USF team for giving me this platform where I can actually share you my own experiences. Right? And most importantly, I'm very thankful for you to come here. It means a lot to me. And while I share you this whole story that I have started from post-high school, I do hope you do get inspired to undertake any project you have in your mind or any long-term goal that you may have. Okay? And just to sort of give you a comprehensive overview on how I'm going to structure the talk, I'm going to divide the talk in 4 different segments. Right? Segment 1, I'll talk about my post-high school, my motivation towards studying in the US, and some of the obstacles that I had to face. Right? And then I'll move into segment 2, where I talk about some of the initial culture shocks. Right? I just go to my school and then I realize, wow, is this really where I wanted to be like, and how I cope up with those things. Right? And I move to segment 3, where I talk about 3 most important things that have really helped me in sort of transitioning my life post-college. Right? And then component 4, or segment 4, I'll talk about what liberal arts education means to me and why one should pursue liberal arts education at first place. Okay? But before I do that, I'd like to tell you that how excited I am here to be today for 2 primary reasons. As Selena pointed out, I used to be a high-frequent USF user. Was back in the fall of 2005. Okay, so I actually, once I graduated from high school in June 2005, I would literally come here every day, okay, to find more information about schools, to have a chat with the counselors, or to even hang out with some of the other people who were in the same process that I was. Right? So in each one of you here today, I see myself, right? A curious face with thousands of different desires to do thousands of wonderful things in life, right? And in that spirit that you guys exhibit, I'm even more excited for the second reason, and that's because all of the recent presentations that I have made in the last 2 or 3 years have somehow been linked with research and development, economics, or public policy. Right? Here I'm actually talking about a significant portion of my life, and that somehow seems very exciting and more fulfilling. Okay? So those are sort of like my 2 primary reasons for why I'm excited to be here. And while we talk about my own story, I do hope we do get inspired from something, and that's something I hope we'll take out of this role. Okay? So where does my story start from, right? My story starts from my motivation towards going to the US, right? Just all of us here today, we're somehow linked with the US, right? Some of us have studied in the US, some of us want to go to the US for studies, and some of us have worked in the US before, right? So let me pause for a moment and pose your question, right? Why do you want to study in the US? What's there in the US? I mean, what's the expectation? What's the primary motivation that you have to think of applying to schools in the US? Right? So just feel free to jump in. There's no right or wrong answer. I just want to hear what kind of motivations you guys have and sort of tie that up with my motivation back in the day. Okay. So why are you motivated to study in the US?
I get to explore various academic fields, like I get to choose my major paper.
Okay, so you don't really have to decide your major right at the beginning. You can sort of explore different fields of study and then make a decision. Anyone else?
Research opportunities.
Research opportunities? Okay. Do you have any interesting research in mind? Any field that you think it's good? What's that?
Nanotechnology.
Nanotechnology? Okay, great. Anyone else?
Diversity.
Diversity? You think Nepal is not diverse enough?
It's not, we get more chance to be like globally, we can get more information and we can interact with different countries.
Sure. Sure, that's good. Did you raise your hand? Anyone else?
Independence.
Independence? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, we can live alone.
Okay. So I mean, it does give you a platform where you could lead an independent life. Sure.
Varieties of subjects are qualitative education.
So the quality of education is supposedly
Varieties
higher.
of subjects you can choose.
Sure. Sure. No females here? Financial aid. Okay. Anyone else? Those are all great responses. Anyone else kind of wanna jump in? No one?
Nice education.
topic.
Do you want to elaborate? That's potentially true, but what do you mean by nice as a person?
Yeah, it's better than Nepal.
Okay, so I mean, that's good.
The atmosphere is really so all studying and
Sure.
there is also politics involved in
Okay, there's no politics involved. Okay, that's a great reason. Anyone else? I'm just trying to gather as many different responses for this as I can. So there's no really wrong or right answer. And primarily, I want this to be more interactive. What happens here is because I'm actually sharing my own story, there's not much room where I can make this interactive, right? Except 2 or 3 persons here and there. And that's why I'm kind of motivating you to jump in and tell me if you have any motivation or if you have any different kind of motivation. Okay, so anyone else need to say anything about this before I move in?
Actually, the education system is flexible. We can utilize our method,
Sure, okay.
and we can get different opportunities for research and improvement. And we also can get scholarship. So we find it on
Great. So that kind of sums up the whole range of different opinions we have, right, about why we're motivated in the US. And you won't believe it, the motivation that I had is something, I mean, I was hoping someone would actually tell me the motivation that would coincide with mine, but interestingly, no one really talked about that motivation. Okay, so let me sort of tell you why I was motivated, right? I was actually motivated to be in the US because I just wanted to get out of here. Really, I just wanted to be out of here and never come back. Right? Now, that's not really the right kind of motivation that one would have to pursue anything at first place, right? So I've kind of tied it up at the end of the talk, where I would sort of tie that up with different experiences I have and what I learned, right? But that wasn't motivation. I just wanted to get out of here and never come back, right? And now this is my actually 7th or 8th time in the last 8 years. So I've actually come here every year. Okay, so, but leaving that motivation behind, I would like to take you back to 2003. That's when I actually finished my SLC from Siddhartha Banastali Institute, right? I studied there for 10 years, and then I had done fairly well in academics, like most of you or most of us usually do, right? And then it was a time for me to decide which high school I want to go to, right? And I applied to Burlington and St. Xavier's, and none of them worked out, right? So what to do, which high school to go to? There are so many options, right? And then I ended up narrowing down to New Summit High School, right? Now you might be asking, why New Summit? Why not any other institution, right? There are so many options out there in the market, right? And so happened that one of my good friends, my elder brother, happened to have graduated from that school, and he happened to be studying in the US, right? So my thinking was like, well, it seems that if you go to this high school, it's quite easy to go to the US. Really, I thought it was very easy to go to the US if you just go to that high school and life would be fine, right? Apparently not. It was not really that easy, right? So once when I met my program coordinator in my high school, I told her that I wanted to explore different fields of study and make sure what field of study I want to go into by first exploring and then making a decision, right? And my program coordinator, Sarita ma'am, actually told me the following way, Jayash, विदेश गएर धेरै युवाहरू बला लिएका छन्, तिमी प्लिज नजाऊ, तिमी यहीँको प्राइभेट कलेजमा पढ. In English, a lot of youth in Nepal actually go to foreign countries and then they end up repenting their decisions. And it's good if you pursue education in a good private school here in California, right? Now, this is not really about a specific portion, specific school, specific anyone. I mean, it's not really about a specific portion, right? It's about a form of discouragement that you might come across when you take part in the process, right? Now, I mean, she could have given me some constructive feedback and told me, well, that's why you should not really go to the US and that's why you should really be here, right? But that's not the point. The point here is what kind of discouragement you come across when you undertake any project and how do you deal with it, right? Ironically, my program coordinator now she lives in the US. But that's not the point. The point here is, what do you do? And the point here is, you end up learning a lesson, right? For every 1 unit of negativity that you come up with, either surrounding you or you hear some kind of negativity, right? It could be of any form. Someone could make fun of you, someone could just tell you that you're not really able to do whatever you want to do, right? For every unit of negativity, you're going to find one equal unit of positivity, right? Now, this sounds like a boring law of equilibrium that we usually learn in physics, right? But apparently this law of physics works very well in real world as well, right? So what did I do? If there was a form of negativity in the form of my program coded in high school, I could always look for something positive, right? Some kind of positive externality that would motivate me to follow whatever goal I had, right? So what did I do? That something or someone could be in the form of a book or any form of community service that you take part in, right? Or it could be in the form of a USF counselor, your brother, your mother, or your girlfriend, right? You just need to find something positive in that something or someone. And that's when my journey towards coming to the USF started, because that's where I kind of got that positive energy from, right? For every negative energy surrounding me, I would actually come to the USF. I didn't have to deal with that. I could just study all day here, right? Just be away from all those sources of negativity and just go back home, right? And why was coming to the USF helpful, right? For lots of reasons. I could come here, get all the information, right? And kind of compare myself with a potential pool of students who were applying for schools in the US, right? So that way I could know where I stood relative to the pool that we're applying to, right? And primarily it also motivated me to start the application process, right? If I know that there's a bunch of group of students who are so motivated and equally good or even infinitely better, that sort of motivates you. Right? That should be the idea. It should motivate you to do whatever you're supposed to, right? So that's where the beginning of application process started, right? Now I assume most of you will be starting your application process sometime in November or December, right? And initially it just seems like an uphill task, right? What do you do? What to write? What not to write, right? Even as small as, like, say, selecting your field of study, right? Your intended field of study. Like, should I select undecided? Should I select engineering? Should I select English, right? It's very confusing, right? And it's something that you've never really done before, so you sort of freak out, right? And you get confused what to do, what not to do, right? And I was very intimidated, at least. I was very intimidated because I was surrounded by a lot of people who had actually graduated from Bangla and right? At least back in those days, but not having too many A-level institutions around, if you had graduated from those two specific schools, they had a competitive advantage, right? So you'd kind of you get intimidated. You think that you would not be good enough to kind of stand against them in the applicant pool, right? So, and so what happened, right? So two primary things that I would like to point out. I actually ended up showing my personal statement to one of my good friends who was already enrolled at Duke back then, right? So he had graduated from Groningen, he didn't end up taking a gap year. He was smart enough to start his education right after his high school, right? So what did I do? I thought, well, I mean, he's a good friend, he has experience, so why not kind of show him what I had written, and it would be kind of nice to get his feedback, right? So I sent my personal essay to him, and then what was his reaction? Well, he skimmed over it and he said, it's okay, it's so-so, right? So that was his, and he's a good friend of mine, we're still in touch, I respect him, right? But that was his response, right? So that's the first thing I want to focus on. The second thing, when I would come to USCF, there was a group of people I ended up building my bonds with, right? So you hang out with them, you kind of start talking about what schools you want to apply to, right? And during that process, I ended up telling them what list of schools I was interested in applying to, right? Not all of them, but some of them told me, dude, this is quite ambitious. I don't think you will get into this school, so just please not apply to these and think about some other alternatives, right? And that kind of intimidated me. I became genuinely sad, and I was like, wow, I mean, what should I do, right? So, and that actually helped me learn the second lesson of my life. And the second lesson was, it's good to reach out to people, talk to people from different spheres of life, right? But eventually you need to make your own decision, right? And that decision has to come out from your heart, right? So what did I do? I mean, the personal statement I wrote was close to my heart. I was honest about it, right? So I chose to stick with that when I applied to schools. Okay, that could be right or wrong, but that's something I chose to do. Okay? And as far as the list of schools were concerned, I also chose to stick with the initial list of schools. Okay? And that's how my application process ended. Right? So now, I mean, you apply to schools, you wait for like 3 months or so to hear back what happens, right? Similarly, I mean, in my case, spring came, right? That was also the same time when there were a bunch of protests, pro-democracy protests against the monarchy was happening, right? It was during the month of April 2006. And I remember, I mean, I had not applied to schools online, right? So that was something I didn't really feel comfortable back then. Somehow, I ended up making photocopies of the common application. I had sent all of them to 20 schools, right? And so how would I find out my decisions, right? I would have to go to the general post office in Sundar and check my mailbox and then hope that I had got a letter, right? And the post office was closed for 2 weeks or so, right? And then I could not really find out. I could have maybe emailed the admissions office, but I wasn't smart enough to do so, so I waited. Okay? And then I just couldn't control. One day I just decided, okay, I'll just walk from my home in Timpune to Sundar, right? It's like a 6 kilometer or 7 kilometer walk. It takes usually 50 minutes. It's not too bad, right? When you're too excited. So I started walking, and then I remember I went to the post office, and then I opened my mailbox, and there were like 11 or 12 letters. Okay, this is one time, and I was like, wow, 11 or 12 letters. I'm sure there's one acceptance, right? 11. And then I keep tearing the envelope apart. I look into all 11 envelopes, and there's not even a single acceptance, right? I was like, wow, my God, now my life is coming to an end. What to do? I've spent almost 1 year like trying to do my best, right, to get into school, and 11 letters in like 2 minutes. Actually, I would just read the first line. If I see it is with censure, or something like that, I don't remember. Or sorry, yeah, exactly. Thank you. It's been a while. But yeah, so I'll just read the first line, and then I would just not read the whole thing, right? And then, but I mean, the point here is, well, you do your best, right? You apply to schools, and there's always some likelihood that you end up feeling rejected or dejected for what you want to do, and someone has not really reciprocated, right? But at the end of the day, you apply to like a lot of schools, and you just need one acceptance, right? So although I had got, I think, 16 rejections, I applied to 21 schools. Right, so 16 rejections, and I think there were 3 or 4 waitlist offers. I just needed one acceptance, and that came through Colorado College. Okay, so that's when I knew that I was going to go into Colorado College. Okay, now let me pause for a moment. How many of you actually have heard about Colorado College? 5 or so? Good. I mean, I'm happy to hear that. I hadn't heard about the school until a week before I actually applied. Okay, so I'm happy to hear that some of you are considering applying there, so that's good. But so, I mean, here the point is, okay, I had got into a school that I wanted to go to, right? And so far, I have learned 2 big lessons, right? Lesson 1, for every unit of negativity that you encounter, you need to look for some units of positivity, right? To kind of help you move ahead, right? And the second lesson was, well, I mean, it's good to reach out to others, hear different opinions, but eventually you need to make a decision, right? And that decision has to be sincere, it has to come out of your heart, but you gotta do what you gotta do, right? So those 2 lessons, I mean, that's something I gained in that 1 whole year of applying for schools, right? So that sort of ends my segment 1, right? And let me kind of make a transition to segment 2, where now I know that I'm actually going to Colorado College, right? So I was a highly energetic person, late teens, right? I was thinking, wow, I've got into a school in the US. It seems like my ultimate goal in life has been met. Now I could just go there, major in English and economics, and any problems in life, if any that never existed, would never really arise, right? So that was the thing in my mind. I was so excited, okay? And what happened once I go there, right? So let me pause for a moment before I actually answer that and ask you a question, right? So what do you have in mind when you, or let's say, let me sort of simplify this further, right? Why do you even want to get education? What's the of course, education does so many good things on us, right? What's one thing that you think is very important? Why one should be educated? Why one should go to an educational institution and get a degree? Okay, so there's no really wrong or right answer here, but I sort of want to know the variation of responses that hopefully I'll get from here. So why should we pursue education?
Be a respectful and successful person.
Be respectful and successful. Okay. So I mean that's okay. Everyone has their opinions. But successful, I will kind of get back to that at the end. But hold that thought in your mind for a moment. Okay.
To secure our future.
To secure our future. Okay.
You will make good salary.
No, you don't get it's fine. To be perfect in something. Okay.
Good salary.
Good salary. Good salary. Okay.
To explore.
To explore. Okay.
To discover oneself.
To discover oneself.
To learn something new.
To learn something new. No one from the middle.
To be good citizen.
Sorry.
To be good citizen. To be good citizen.
To be a good citizen. Okay. Any response from this point? I want equal participation from each of these columns. Do you have any? You guys want to get educated, right? So what's the burning? Why do you think one should receive education?
To pursue your passion,
To find out what you're passionate about?
to chase that passion.
Okay.
To broaden the horizon of experience and knowledge.
To be self-dependent.
Social obligation. Social obligation.
Social obligation. So you want to, okay. Sure, there are different reasons. Everyone has their own reasons, right? Great, so I'll sort of get back to my opinion on why one should get education again at the end, but sort of let me give you a brief overview on what happened once I landed at Colorado College, right? We usually call it CC, so I'll just use the word CC from this point on, kind of make it easier for me to speak, right? So as I told you, I was very excited, right? I go there, right? And in less than 2 weeks, the variation of experiences that I had there was immense, right? And in the name of a community service trip, I was helping my friend Dan cut down a huge tree and lift a log of the wood to move to a different group of guys who were actually helping set up the house, right? And there was this guy who had not done any physical labor at home, except making tea or using rice cooker, right? So, and in the name of socialization, right, you go to events, you dance, and like you play all kinds of games that we've never really heard names of, right? And I remember this one particular incident. This was the first day of my cultural anthropology class, right, where we just decided to stay outside of the classroom. It was a nice sunny day, so we just stood in the lawn with the professor, and the first thing we had to do was sort of play a game, right? Sort of a name game, where you are trying to help everyone identify and sort of build some kind of relationship before we actually start learning in the classroom, right? And what was the game about? Okay, so the game was, say my name is Ram, right? And if my name is Ram, I would have to pick up an animal that starts with my first initial of my first name. So I would have to pick up an animal that starts with R, right? And then talk about 2 interesting things about that animal, and then also talk about 2 interesting things about myself. Okay? So that sort of would help everyone identify you with some kind of animal, and then it's good, right? And with me, it was J, right? So what's the animal I could think of from J? Jellyfish? Okay, fine, sounds cool. Do I know anything about jellyfish? Well, I learned about it in my bio class back in grade 10, but I don't really remember much. Or whatever I learned wasn't really interesting enough. So what do? Right? So you come up with a small situation. It's not, maybe, I mean, it's not a big deal for most of you, but now I kind of, in retrospect, I think about it and I ask myself, wow, I mean, what was I doing, right? And how do you handle those situations, right? So that's one story, right? And then in the name of financial aid, you'd go to school, right? And you'd have to find a job on your own, right? So great, you have full scholarship, right? It's great. You go there and then you also need some pocket money, right? You want to go to a theater, watch a movie, or you want to buy some groceries sometimes. I hang out with your friends quite some, right? So find an alternative job on campus. And how would I do about it, right? I had been raised in a very protective environment, hadn't gone anywhere outside my home, right? Maybe you guys are more adventurous than I was, but my story is like that. So how would I go about it? Who would I talk to? How do I find a job, right? So in less than 3 weeks, these were, I mean, in retrospect, I feel like okay, these 3 things came to my mind, right? So, and what happened when I go to the classroom? So my first class was a cultural anthropology class, right? So we had a group of 15 students, and we were assigned to read a textbook in one night, and we're supposed to talk about it in the following day, right? So I read the textbook, great, in one night. Anyhow, I somehow managed to go to the classroom, and then the professor, Professor Jacobson, right? So she sits in the classroom and she just points out at me, right? Because the class was about Nepal, and I happen to be from Nepal, right? So she thought, I mean, I would give some interesting feedback or perspective. I would bring some interesting perspective in the classroom. So it would be kind of nice to start the talk from my opinion. So she just asked me, what do you think about the book, right? And it's like, well, I mean, I used to think I'm the most outspoken person in the world. I would talk so much at my house, right? I used to think I know so many things, I can just handle all kinds of situations, and you go there, and when you see like bunch of other smart people, infinitely better than you, you just lose your words, right? So what do you do? I mean, I know a lot about the book, but how do you process my thoughts, right? What should I present, right? In a short period of time, in an interesting manner so that it kind of builds the conversation forward, right? So, and I was very shy. I remember, so classroom participation was a big factor, right? So if you want to do well in the class, in any humanities or social science class, you need to speak out loud, right? And give some interesting points on different topics. And there was a time I would just tell myself, wow, I've uttered 2 sentences, I'm done for today. Now I didn't need to speak out. I'll again come to the class tomorrow and again contribute 2 sentences. That will make sure the teacher remembers me, and I'll somehow manage to pass this class or do reasonably. Okay, but that's not really what I should be thinking, right? And so the class would end, and then everyone would go to the dining halls, right? So you know a few friends at the beginning during a read this, and you go to the dining hall, and then you look for some familiar faces. It's kind of overwhelming sometimes. You just look for them and you don't find anyone, right? So what do you do? What do you eat? Who should you go and talk with, right? And what do? You just kind of get lost. You just get intimidated by this whole group of people talking out loud, having fun, right? And what would I do? I would just grab something real quick and then go to my room. Okay, I would try to hide myself in that corner desk in my room, and I would log into Windows Messenger. Back then we didn't have Facebook, Skype was just coming in, right? So I hope to find someone online and hope to share my story, and no one would come online, right? Or someone would come online, and then I'll just talk for hours or something. But that's not really why one should go to a liberal arts college, right? Or any institution at first place. I mean, you go to a place where you have access to all kinds of experiences, and you're kind of preventing yourself from even trying them out, right? So, and that's when I learned my 3rd lesson, right? And the 3rd lesson is, well, if you have to survive, you need to make some initiative and get out of your comfort zone, right? And try to see if you can come up with any strategies that will help you survive, okay? So what did I do? The following day, I just went to the dining hall, right? And let me just pick up a couple of guys. What's your name? Sandesh, okay? What's your name? Sulabh, okay. Sandesh and Sulabh, they are good friends, right? They're sitting in a table, okay? They know each other from a long time back. They're just having fun, right? I pick up my tray, I have lots of food, right? I look around, and I didn't see anyone, right? And it's not really cool to be sitting in the corner and not interacting with anyone, right? So just imagine 2 friends in a dining hall, just having fun, and this is a not so cool looking person, like just holding a tray, right? And trying to find friends. And I would just go there and then say, hi, my name is Jayash. I'm from Nepal. Can I have a seat? Right? And in retrospect, I find that very funny, and it could be very annoying too, right? Just imagine someone, is anyone here from Dolpa? Okay, so someone just, you don't really expect anyone, I guess no one is from Dolpa here, right? Someone just comes in here and then says, hi, my name is Ram, I'm from Dolpa, right? You can just say hi, but why would you say like I'm from, hi, my name is blah, 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 I'm from Dolpa, and it's not very cool. It's not really but that's what I did. I would just go there and say, hi, I'm Jayash, I'm from Nepal, can I have a seat? And you won't believe it actually worked. People are nice. They were nice, people are nice in general, and it worked. They wanted to know who I was, and it helped me get to interact with them more, right? And so every day I would go there, I would just find new set of guys. Like today I would find Dan, tomorrow I would find Matt, the following day I would find Fritz. It doesn't matter. You just go there and like just talk with random people, right? And that's how you actually make friends. So basically I was just getting out of my comfort zone. That's something I would not really do right now with you, or maybe it's not really recommended, but it actually worked for me, right? So getting out of comfort zone. And so that's the socialization part, right? And I wasn't really doing too well in my answer class, right? I was actually one of the least performing students in that class. There were 15 people, and then I'm pretty sure I was getting around B- as a social, right? So I was very concerned. I was used to getting good grades in Nepal. I used to think, I had high opinion of myself. I thought I was the smartest kid in the world, and turns out I'm not really, right? So I go to my professor's office, and I tell her, see, I'm from Nepal, I mean, I'm a good student, but I don't know what's not working. I'm trying my best, I'm reading, I'm writing, but somehow I don't really get good grades, right? So unlike my program coordinator from high school, she seemed to be very nice. She tried to help me out. She told me what's working, what's not, right? And she gave me some guidance. She told me, okay, you could try X, you could try Y, right? And that sort of helped me. That sort of made me feel better, right? Tomorrow I go to the class, and then I just start giving my own opinions, right? Some of those opinions could be right, wrong. Someone could agree, someone could disagree, right? But that's part of the game. You just have to go out there and tell what you think, right? And that's part of the game. You just go there and talk about what you think on certain topic. It's not that hard, right? But it was so hard for me for the first 2 months or so, right? So the point here is nothing is really supposed to be too hard, right? You just need to find out. So you stand here, right? You kind of look around different dots, right? So think of like red dots as some of your problems, right? And for every problem you encounter, there's going to exist some green dots, right? That, let's say, are those solutions for each of those problems, right? So you just got to kind of look around and see what you can do, right? You identify a red dot, you look for a potential green dot, and sort of try to match them up and solve the problem, right? So from that point onward, if my writing wasn't considered good, or if I ended up getting a bad grade on my writing assignment, I would take an initiative to make an appointment in the writing center. I would go and talk to her, what I could work, what I need to improve on, right? If I need to get a ride to the airport, I would ask my friends, or I reach out to people if they would help me out, right? So the idea here is you really enjoy being in the comfort zone that we all are in, but the earlier that you try to get out of the comfort zone and make an initiative, the better for you when you actually leave school, right? Or anyway, it doesn't matter if you go to a liberal arts institution, it applies anywhere. You go to any kind of job that you have, right? Get out of your comfort zone and make an initiative. So that's the third lesson that I learned. And that sort of like ends my segment 2, where I kind of briefly talk about a couple of interesting, hopefully interesting stories and how I kind of dealt with them, right? So different individuals will have different obstacles to go through. That's the kind of obstacles I have, right? So now before I move to segment 3, right? So segment 3 is where I want to talk about what I actually learned at CC or at a liberal arts institution, right? What are some of the things that have been helpful for me to kind of move ahead in my life, or how to handle day-to-day matters in life, right? So, but I'll get back to that sort of at the end, but mostly I would say my education at CC ended up giving me a wide range of life mastering skills, right? And what do I mean by that? Those skills that are really useful for you to lead a life, okay? Smoothly, without any problems. I'll get back to those skills or those things again at the end when I kind of tie up with the impact of education and my opinion on liberal arts school, right? I'll get back to that. But before I sort of start that segment, I'd also like to highlight some of the 3 different points that have been really instrumental in shaping up my personality, right? Wherever I have been, whatever job I have held, those things have been very helpful, okay? Now again, I would not really like to focus on doing well in classes, right? We all are good students, we all have the right motivation. If you just do work, you end up doing well in the classes, right? So that's something I don't really want to focus on, because by default, as a student, we all are supposed to do well in classes, right? There's nothing really interesting about that. Okay, I would like to point out 3 different factors that really help me. Okay, and these are the things that may not really apply to others, but in my opinion, they have been very helpful. Okay? First one is writing. Okay, so how many of you here think that you're good writers? No one, really? Just one? We just have one good writer? 2, 3, 4. I would expect at least 20 hands. Anyway, I used to think I was a very good writer, okay? And there's nothing wrong about that. I mean, I'm sure we all are good writers, but it also comes down to what kind of writing we do right here. You take an English class, you have to write a specific kind of writing assignment. You take a comparative literature class, and the kind of writing becomes different, right? Or you take a cultural anthropology class, and a typical ethnography writing sample will be different, right? So I guess here I'm not really trying to point out that we're not really good writers. Rather, I'm trying to point out that, well, we're not really used to, unless you've gone to international schools or have taken all kinds of classes, then it really helps. But for me, I was not really used to writing all kinds of assignments for these different fields of study. All I had done was English, right? I knew how to write poems, how to write short stories, how to write essays, but that was about it, right? And everyone thought I was a good writer, but maybe apparently not, right? When you kind of expand your horizon, be in a classroom where everyone else is so much better, you realize that, well, I mean, you're not that good. Anyway, but here the point I want to make is writing is something that we always tend to underestimate, at least here. And now I can kind of see the change in curriculum here in the last few years that schools seem to kind of make sure that people write more, so that's great. But what I learned was with writing, right, even if we write well, what happens is you need to write, rewrite, make revisions, and keep rewrite again, right? And that can be kind of an annoying process, right? And you think, well, yeah, writing is important. Reading, writing, listening, speaking, those are 4 fundamental things that we need to do in life anyway, right? So what's so special about writing? Well, I think writing takes you far away, right? Once you graduate, you might end up applying for a grant, right? If you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to pitch your business plan or something, right? You have to convince people, and there you need to write effectively, right? Or you could even write an academic paper where you need to justify what's the methodology you have done, right? Or you could even be writing a report if you're working for an INGO or NGO about any development program intervention that the organization has done, right? So writing is actually very underestimated, and a lot of my friends who actually ended up going to liberal schools, I didn't really think they actually used that opportunity to kind of hone their writing, but I think I was very lucky to be able to take different classes where I was required to read and process that information and write in a convincing manner so that the audience knows what's happening, right? So writing is something that I think really is one of the important skills that I have now. Okay, so now let me move to the second point. And the second point also is kind of, sounds like a cliche, but it's so much more important than what we all realize. So communication, right? How do you communicate effectively, right? Think of the following situations in a school environment, right? You go to a classroom, you're supposed to tell your professor what you think about a book in less than 3 minutes, right? And the book is around 220 pages long, right? So how do you summarize those big ideas in 3-minute long conversation, right? So how do you synthesize, how do you process all that information quickly and tell the audience what's happening here, right? Think of this situation where you have to meet your professor in an office hour, right? You have to tell your problem. Professor may not have enough time, so you can't really like mumble and go here and there. You just have to get at the point, right? Think of applying for summer internship, right? You have to talk with human resources folks and you have to convince them why you're a good fit for the position that you're applying to, right? You have to do some community service, and if you're leading a project, you need to kind of guide your team members, right? You need to coordinate, you need to lead them, right? And all those things actually require a high level of communication, right? That's something we really underestimate, but I think getting into a liberal arts school and trying to use all the opportunities, there's so many opportunities out there, you just don't have enough time. What to do, how do you prioritize, right? So any opportunity that comes across there, you kind of use that to hone your communication skills. It could be anything. It could be any of the examples that I listed out this while ago. It could be participating in a debate, right? It could be speaking with an alum on a telephone, right? So there are bunch of different tasks or experiences that you'll come across where you'll get an opportunity to hone your communication skills, right? And that's sort of been helpful for me in my life post-college, where I have to interact with policymakers, right? We have to kind of summarize what's going on, right? So being able to communicate effectively is very good. And anything that helps you hone your communication skills, please try that out. Okay? And this is sort of earlier because you're in the process of applying for schools, but again, I mean, something that I want you to remember when you actually reach that phase. Okay? Great, so second point. And third point, I'd like to highlight the need of building relationships, right? And how do you nurture them? Okay? And that actually starts apart from building relationship with friends, right? For me, it's really important that I got an opportunity to hone my relationship with my faculty advisors or like professors in school, right? And how does that happen? I remember the first time I went to my department or the academic advisor that I was assigned, I go to his office and he's very excited, right? He's a kid from Nepal and he hasn't had anyone from Nepal for a while, so he just gets excited. He just talks about so many different things, and I'm just looking at him and I'm in awe, right? I mean, when I have to remember that meeting with him now, I don't really remember what I actually spoke. All I remember is what he was talking about. So that's not good, right? You kind of, communication has to be a two-way process, right? So how do you build a relationship, right? So that's something that you get an opportunity to hone in a liberal arts institution because you have access to professors, their office hours, right? You get to meet them and sort of talk with them more about what you're interested in, right? And talk about your research interests and that they might be able to help you out with potential job opportunities, right? Not only about job opportunities, right? Think about what you should be thinking about, right? Your inner goals, and they will help you speak out loud about what you're interested in and help you find a conclusion if you're confused about it, right? So here I would like to highlight that I've been very fortunate enough to sort of be able to build my relationship with lots of different professors. Just 2 weeks ago, my academic advisor was here with 15 students teaching a class on Sherpas in Nepal, right? So I got an opportunity to meet the class, hang out with them, and sort of learn about my country as well, right? I'm also co-authoring an academic paper with a professor in my school, right? So that's something you don't really get an opportunity if you go to a large research university, because they're so busy doing their own research. But if you go to a small liberal arts college, you get to talk with them, you get to express your research interests, and something might work out, right? And so that's something I would like to encourage, right? Build a relationship. It doesn't really have to be for professors. It's about anyone, right? Friends, people you meet in a day-to-day life, right? That's really helpful. Okay, so writing, communication, and building and nurturing relationships. Okay? Now, they don't really sound too important maybe for you right now, but I'm telling you, for me, it has been really helpful. Okay? And that's my story. Okay? And so let me sort of move to segment 4, where I want to talk about what's the impact of education that I have had, right? Why has my education been so helpful? What are some of the things that I think are important, right? So you kind of pointed out self-independence, right? Someone pointed out financial security, right? Someone pointed out something. I mean, the response there was a huge variation in the kind of responses, right? For me, the impact of education, or why should someone even pursue education in the first place, right? For me, for 2 primary reasons. One is this idea of being confident at what you do, whatever you do, right? Say you're interested in development, right? It sounds really easy to just say, I'm interested in development. I'm from a developing country. I think it's a good cause, right? But have you ever thought about issues come in development? Are you ready to walk in the field in the scorching sun, interact with people from all kinds of, right, all kinds of languages, socioeconomic characteristics, right, and be ready to emerge in a field setting, right? No one really thinks about that, right? Development just sounds cool. It just sounds as if you're contributing something to the world, right? But, and how do you make sure that you're confident enough to pursue those things, right? And getting back to that, I think that's what liberal arts education does. Rather than focusing the impact of education in terms of monetary outcomes in the sense that how much will I be paid if I end up following this major. As opposed to that, it makes you think about what you're passionate about. Okay? Whether you can think deeply on a certain issue, how much contribution you can make. Okay? Now that sounds rather theoretical, but I'm telling you, it actually does. Okay? And for that, you actually really need to be in that environment. Okay? And here, I think, in Nepal, mostly we talk about, just this past other day, one of my relatives was asking me, Jayash, what do you think has the highest scope? What field of study should I have, should I ask my daughter to study, right? And I just get angry when I hear scope. What does that even mean, right? If one field of study has a bigger scope than the other, why do those fields of study even exist, right? If every field of study exists, there's a reason for that. And all you need to find out is whether you're a good fit for that field of study, whether you're interested in it, whether you can make any contribution or not, right? So think about education more in terms of what you will be interested in, what kind of impact you will have, rather than thinking, well, if I'm a computer science major, I can get a job very easily, right? So those kind of things don't really come into your mind once you get exposed to that kind of environment. Okay? So that's first impact I think it has, is that the notion of empowerment and the confidence that you can go to any part of the world and do things very well, whatever task you're assigned, right? If you're a development professional, you should be ready to move to Africa, you should be ready to move to Nepal, you should be willing to work with people in the US too, right? You should be open-minded. You should not really have any strict preference on, I'm not going to leave Nepal, I'm not going to leave the US, right? That's not really the right kind of attitude. Okay, so that notion of confidence and empowerment really comes from that. The second point I would like to highlight is this distinction between excellence and success, right? So what do you mean when someone says success? What does that come to your mind? Have you guys never thought about being successful? I'm sure you have, right? So what comes to your mind?
Self-satisfaction.
Self-satisfaction, okay. Does everyone else think about self-satisfaction when they think about success?
We have achieved what we wanted to be.
Okay.
Use salary.
Exactly. Salary is a good proxy for measuring how successful you are, right? Anyone else? Fame? Sure. Fame is someone else.
Dreaming to reality.
What's that?
Dream to reality.
Dreaming to reality. Okay, so I mean, different people have different opinions about what success is, right? And that's exactly the point I want to come across as, right? So success is related. For me, Sulabh could be a successful person, and for what's your name again? Okay, for Sulabh, Sanjay could be a successful person, but not vice versa, right? So we always have different proxies to actually measure who is successful and who is not. So you should not really be thinking about, it's great if you end up being successful, right? It's great. But what about excellence, right? And someone actually made a point about self-satisfaction and the sense of accomplishment. And I think I would like to categorize those 2 points under excellence as opposed to successful. You don't really need education to be a successful person, right? I mean, a lot of influential figures have actually dropped out of schools, right? So, I mean, you really have to ask yourself, do you really want to be successful? Sure, why not? But do you want to think about what kind of impact you can make, what kind of self-satisfaction you can get by pursuing something, right? So here I would like to make one very important point. You get a good, well-paid job, right? You make some shitloads of money, right? Great, it's good, no doubt about that. If you get an opportunity, you should definitely pursue it. And by doing so, you could also gain some self-satisfaction, right? But think about this. I mean, anything can happen to whatever money you have made, right? Tomorrow someone could just steal it. You could just lose it, right? You have a well-paid job, you could just lose your job from financial crisis, right? That happened to a lot of people. But think about the self-satisfaction part, right? The sense of accomplishment that you make by doing something, I don't think anyone can steal away from you, okay? That's always going to stick in your mind, okay? And during that whole process, people will label you as a failure, right? Not being able to supposedly be successful, right? But you should really think about being both successful and also achieve excellence in whatever field of study you are pursuing, okay? And sort of trying to wrap those 2 points up, because I'm running short on time, I would also like to make a point that I'd like to tie that up with my motivation that I had at the beginning, right? It was clearly the wrong motivation, right? I was happened to be a lucky person who happened to get into a college of my choice without having the right level of motivation, right? I was thinking that just getting into CC would solve all the problems that I have in my life, and I would just live a happy life, right? But that was just premature to think about that first place, right? So think of this. I mean, you have a goal in your mind, you achieve it, right? And there will be another goal in your mind that will come across, right? You want to achieve one something more, right? So this never is going to end. It's a never-ending process, right? You solve a problem, and then another problem comes in, right? So you get very excited, you feel very happy, you feel accomplished when you solve a problem. So that's great. And you should not really freak out when something else comes up, right? So coming back to the impact of education, I think what the impact really is, whenever any problem comes in life, you should not really freak out, okay? You should have the whole range of experiences that gives you confidence to be able to deal with all those problems, because problems are never really going to end, okay? So you should not really freak out when a new problem comes in. You shouldn't really get too excited either when you solve the problem. So I want to tie this up with your application process, right? So some of you, I mean, it's great. All of us are always motivated, okay, to pursue a goal. Okay? We have a thing in our mind, we do our best, right? But don't think of this application process as like a ticket to something that will just solve all the problems in your life, right? This should not really be your ultimate goal, okay? Unless you choose to just stay idle and do nothing. If you want to do that, then great. There's nothing really you can do about it, right? But if you really want to keep moving ahead in life, the more you want to branch out, the more you want to venture into, you'll come across with more problems, right? But that doesn't really mean that you should be worried about. For every problem, you'll have a potential solution. You just need to look around and try to see which solution matches up with that problem, okay? Think about those red and green dots. For every problem that ever exists, there will be a solution, okay? So don't think of this application process as an ultimate goal. Rather, use this opportunity to kind of get some pleasure, right? Just enjoy the whole process of applying, right? Once you enjoy, once you're not really stressed out about the whole application process, you really enjoy the whole process, right? And that whole notion of self-satisfaction, no one can really steal away that, okay? So that's one point I really like you to think about when you get out of this room. And with that note in my mind, I would like to respond to any questions that you guys may have. Okay? Thank you. I actually majored in, that was a quick question by the way. I majored in mathematical economics, so I took some courses in economics and some courses in math.
What did you hold then?
What's that?
Position in World Bank.
What about the World Bank?
They were the position in World Bank.
Oh, I was working as a consultant for the World Bank, where I was looking into the impact of some of the projects related to education and learning outcomes of children.
How much do you want then?
That's an interesting question. Let me kind of try to answer some other questions and then we'll talk about it. Thank you. Any question about the whole application process or my own story? I'd be happy. Please introduce yourself and then tell me what you're doing, and then I'll be happy to answer. Okay.
My name is JPAL. I want to ask you that how much financial aid did you receive in Colorado?
Sure. Thank you, Bipul. That's a good question. So how much financial aid did I receive? I actually received full financial aid, but I had to pay around $800 a year. Okay.
And I'm also thinking about like doing some major in economics. How did you explore your interest in this?
Sure. How did I explore my history, right?
History.
What's that? History.
Interest.
So that's a good question. How did I end up deciding what field of study that I ended up pursuing, right? So I was a physics student in high school, and I enjoyed physics, but I didn't really like the lab component part. So with economics, I was able to use numbers, right? But I didn't really have to work in the lab. Okay, so that was the primary reason. But as I started taking more principles of economic classes, I realized that, well, it's something that I could have an impact on and something that's very interesting. Okay, so that's how I chose economics.
Sure. Well, you said you work somewhere, but like you studied economics, mathematics. Is the job tedious or maths or have to like analyze stuff?
So, I mean, so here I would like to point out, right, we're always thinking about what job, what school, right? That's not really the point. It doesn't really matter which school you go to, it doesn't really matter where you work at, right? What matters is what you do and what impact it makes on you to eventually grow up as a professional, right? So that's something I would like to focus here, okay? And you're asking me about what impact my field of study had on the job that I was doing? Is that right?
I'm asking if your job is tedious, every day, like boring.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's interesting. So someone actually told me a long time back, there's no research study, I'm sure people have done research on this, but most jobs converge to boredom, okay? So that's, I mean, that's what some people believe. Now, I mean, people have different strategies to avoid that situation. You could switch your job, you could work at one place for 1 year and then you could switch, right? So whether I was bored out of my work, I mean, it's natural to feel bored one day, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm bored all the time. Okay, so I didn't think so. I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I always look forward to what I usually look for. Okay, when it comes to jobs.
I'm Safia, and I want to ask, would you explain more about liberal arts, what comes under it, and how it differs from other?
Sure. I mean, I'm sure you could find information about this here at USEF itself, but broadly speaking, you don't really have to declare your major, right? You could explore different fields of study. You could take Antro, you could take English, you could take physics, and you could declare your major at the end of the second year.
I just, what is difference between liberal arts and other?
So that's something I would not be really able to explain too well. I'm sure the counselors here know really well about it. What I would like you to ask me is anything related to my own story or anything that applies in your given situation so that I can help you. Okay, so that's something it's not, I do think that that's the primary difference, but I'm not quite sure about it. I'm sure here you can find information on that. Okay.
What will you say to
What's that?
What will you say to next company?
Oh, okay. So here, I mean, it seems most of the people are asking me about my work experience, right? So again, I mean, that's just one of the INGOs that does work on development. They do research and development interventions and look into what impact any project has, right? But here, I was hoping that you'd ask me questions that is sort of relatable, right? That kind of situation that we were going through, right? But I mean, you're free to ask any questions. I'll do my best, but.
Okay, like you have done your bachelor's from small college, right? Like with a small number of students. So if you continue your education, would you like to explore like pre-college or pre-university?
Sure, yeah, definitely. So liberal arts institutions, they just give you usually a bachelor's degree, right? So if you want to continue further graduate education, you'd have to apply for a large research university. Okay, that's a good point. I mean, I think having got education at a smaller college, it really helped me. I wasn't as overwhelmed as I would have been, say, if I had gone to a large school. Okay, so it really comes down to what fit, whether you're a good fit or not. If you think you don't really need to be in a small school, feel free to apply to a large school. I mean, it's just that I wasn't really so sure about making sure I would be a good fit.